After surging in 2010-11, global food prices have been on a downtrend, but this can quickly change. Structural drivers of food demand, rising EM population and income growth, coupled with an increasing appetite for more protein, remain very strong. The supply side of the food equation is also tightening, as the 8-year trend decline in food prices have discouraged new agricultural investment at a time of decreasing arable land and water supply. There's also been an increased frequency of extreme weather events and the outbreak of the African swine fever. Michael, talk us through our Nomura Food Vulnerability Index, or NFVI for short.
Our NFVI objectively estimates a country's exposure to large food price swings, depending on nominal GDP per capita, the share of food in household consumption, and net food imports. Our ranking of 110 economies highlight Libya, Tajikistan, Montenegro, Syria, and Algeria as the 5 economies most vulnerable to a sustained rise in food prices. The 50 most vulnerable countries in our NFVI are largely EM and collectively make up 26% of world GDP, but a much greater 59% of the world's population.
Frontier economies are most at risk. The top 30 vulnerable economies in our NFVI are nearly all frontier economies. Their outstanding hard currency debt has tripled over the last 5 years. And many also owe hidden debt to China, putting them at risk of being in a debt trap. As these governments have little fiscal space, they could impose trade controls to protect their consumers in the event of higher food prices, and this could amplify the food price surge globally.
Our analysis of the 2010-2011 food price surge confirms that economic fundamentals deteriorated much more significantly in what the NFVI classified as the 30 most vulnerable economies than in the 30 least vulnerable ones. These countries saw weaker growth, higher inflation, a wider fiscal deficit, and steeper policy rate hikes.
Overall, we would argue that in the next surge in food prices, the most vulnerable countries in our NFVI are probably going to be affected more than in past episodes of food price surges. This is for 2 reasons. One, it's these economies that are also most vulnerable to climate change-induced disruptions to agriculture. And 2, it's also these economies that have experienced a sharp rise in debt to dangerously high levels. So it's really double trouble for the top 30 economies in our NFVI. Michael, please describe some of the analysis that we've done using our NFVI.
For the 30 most and least vulnerable economies, we utilize the NFVI scores and credit ratings to assess where sovereign CDS spreads and bond yields are currently most mispriced. Our results are strikingly similar for both markets. We also use the NFVI scores to gauge which of the 110 countries are more vulnerable or could benefit from food and oil prices rising in tandem. We also look at the most exposed country groups if food and oil prices part ways.